So Putin, after capturing Crimea, he had once famously said that if you compress the spring hard, it will snap back even harder. Now, what are the reasons that Putin feels that the spring is compressed so hard? Well, your boy is back after a long time. Welcome to Civic Sense.
Launchers in Belarus, military tents in Crimea, and additional artillery units in western Russia. Images taken in early February show how Moscow continued to deploy its armed forces to surround Ukraine. After several months of military buildup, this map shows where Russian resources were stationed to the north, south, and east of the country.
So for the past month and more, there has been a buildup of troops on the Russian-Ukrainian border. And Russia says that it was doing a planning for the military exercise. And of course, they were lying. We know that now. And the situation has escalated quickly right now. And the war has started. Today, it is the 6th day of the war, 6th day of the conflict that is going on. Now, Putin justifies this war. I won't say Russia, because after all, Putin is an autocratically elected leader. So, Putin, he justifies it by saying that he wants to denazify the Ukrainian government. Now, he says that he wants to liberate the people of Ukraine from these Nazi people. Now, this might sound like a joke to you guys, because after all, the Ukrainian president is Jewish. Now, you might have heard about the various reasons why Putin and his army of kleptocrats, why they invaded Ukraine. So, one of the reasons given is that they don't want NATO to expand into the Eastern Europe. So, what is NATO? NATO, or as we call it, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. This treaty was formed after the Second World War, when the USSR, the then USSR, which was a socialist state, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, it was trying to increase its sphere of influence. And it was expanding in Central Asia, it was expanding in Eastern Europe. And at that time, the Western countries, they felt that they needed to keep a check on the power of the USSR to stop the spread of influence of USSR. And they created this military alliance that was called as the NATO. So, Putin does not want NATO to expand into Eastern Europe. This is one of the reasons. The other reasons that they give is that Putin wants these Western countries to remove troops from the Eastern European countries. And also the third reason that he has given is that USA, it shouldn't be protecting the Eastern European allies with a nuclear security. Well, you would think why Putin is so stubborn with his demands. It's like his way or the highway. Now, international politics, it doesn't work in this way. And there's more to this conflict than what meets the eye. So, to understand this conflict, we have to dig a little deeper. Now, the roots, they lie, of course, in the history. The USSR empire was formed. It increased its sphere of influence. NATO was formed to counteract USSR. And in 1991, the USSR collapsed. And these then Soviet republics, they became independent. So, even after these republics became independent, social relations between these countries, they still remained. Now, some people, they did not accept this division of borders, and there was this one person who believed that the USSR's breakdown was one of the greatest catastrophe of the 20th century. Now, of course, this person seems to be forgetting about the two world wars, and this person is none other than Mr. Vladimir Putin. Now, Putin's worries, they got real when these ex-USSR countries, they started developing friendships with the West. They started joining the European Union, and guess what? They even started joining the NATO. There is this example of Czech Republic, Poland, Hungary, which have joined the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Meanwhile, Putin started increasing his own power. He started weakening the institutions, and he kind of became an autocratic leader in Russia. Now, he still sees international politics through the lens of Russian Empire. Ukraine was a jewel in the crown of this empire. It had industries. It still has industries. It is a resource-rich region. It is one of the top exporters in different farm produce. There's barley, there's sunflower, and many others. The people in Ukraine, though, they started turning favorable towards the West. This led to the feeling of insecurity among the Russians. I can give you an example. जब घर का लड़का बीवी लेके आता है, automatically the mother feels threatened. She feels insecure. Right? This was somewhat the case with Russia and Ukraine. Now, this insecurity is reflected in an essay which is titled On the Historical Unity of Russians and Ukrainians. And it says that there is this same cultural heritage among the people. They share the same blood, they share the same bond. And essentially, these are the same people. It was just the outside forces which used the policy of divide and rule to divide the Russian people and the Ukrainian people. And guess what? Who wrote this UPSC level essay? It was Putin himself. He started exploiting this by sending militants to Ukraine to destabilize the Ukrainian nation, and then actually annexing different parts of Ukraine. There's this example of 2014 where Russia annexed Crimea. His mission? To undo the greatest catastrophe of the 20th century. Okay, so there are various other reasons also. There's geographical reason. Russia, it is of course blessed with a long coastline, but a big part of this coastline, it remains frozen for more than half a year, and this makes it impossible for navigation. Now here comes Ukraine. Ukraine has a long coastline along the Black Sea, and this directly connects to the Mediterranean Sea. And of course, when you are connected with the Mediterranean Sea, you are connected with the world. So Russia desires this access. Now, if Ukraine is to join NATO or the European Union, there is a risk of losing this access. The other big reason that I think that is much more plausible is that Putin fears democracy. Now, Putin, he fears that the democratic revolution, it might reach Moscow. And what frightens Putin and his oligarchs is the very possibility that the Russians in the future, they might want to get rid of these people. Democratic, successful European nations, they would be a menace to him personally. These democratic European nations, they kind of show an alternative to the Russian people, that there is an alternative there is a life outside of Russia which is much more prosperous, where there is freedom of speech and expression, and this would be a big threat to Putin and his oligarchs. Now, this is one of the reasons why Putin always tries to undermine the European unity. For instance, European Union is always undermined by Russia. He always cynically tries to support the far-right political parties of Europe, and he tries to sow some form of the divisions among these countries. Now, failing Europe, it would be a very big boon for Putin. Individual countries of Europe, they can be threatened, they can be corrupted from within. Now, Putin he also controls a formidable size of propaganda machine, and he has been very successful in selling this story of Russia being threatened by evil NATO, and this has kind of forced him to invade Ukraine. So what lies ahead in this conflict? Putin, I think he saw the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, and that kind of motivated him into invading Ukraine. He thought that as Taliban rolled into Kabul, the Russian armed forces might roll into Kiev. There wouldn't be any bloodshed. Ukrainians, the civilian Ukrainians, they wouldn't resist, and it would be clean invasion of a foreign country. He also saw that the United States and Europe, they couldn't help Afghanistan, right? And they wouldn't be of much help to even to Ukraine. So he felt that let's go, I'll be liberating the people of Ukraine. And if you look at his speech, when he declared that Russia was going to invade Ukraine, he had even asked the Ukrainians to lay down their arms, return to their families, and that they wouldn't be harmed if they laid down their arms. I think this was his expectation, and many thought that it would happen or it would play out in the same way. Now, Putin felt that the common Ukrainians, they wouldn't care who was installed in Kiev, who was going to rule over them, and it would have been true if there were these previous governments of Ukraine, government of Poroshenko, but it was being ruled right now by a person named Vladimir Zelensky, and he himself is an outsider. He is kind of anti-establishment, and he is kind of driven by this desire to make things better for the people. Somewhat like what Achhe Din are to be promised, or they were promised in 2014. Anyways, now don't get me wrong. Zelensky is not perfect. There are various problems associated with his regime too. But still, Ukraine had a precedent in which the common Ukrainians, they could believe, they could hope for a better future. Now, Putin expected the Ukrainians to lay down their arms. He even expected the president to flee, and then he could then install a puppet in Ukraine, and he could demilitarize Ukraine, and after that he would roll back to Russia. Now, at least this was his expectation. He would then declare his peacekeeping mission over after a few days. There would be few casualties. The Western countries, they might crumble, but they won't hurt Russia. And this was his expectation, but what Putin got, it was complete opposite of what he had thought of. Zelensky stayed in Ukraine. He even motivated the Ukrainians, he mobilized the Ukrainian army, and the army right now is even fighting much harder than what they would have fought in the normal circumstances. People, the common people, they even did not lay down their arms, and for the most part they did not even run away from the war. And this is where the things have gone messy. Now there is this other side of the Russian invasion also. NATO, as it is one of the main stakeholder in this conflict, it was created, of course, to check the influence of USSR. But after the fall of USSR, its main objective had vanished. It kind of had gone into an oblivion. But with the invasion of Ukraine, Putin has reinstated the relevance of NATO. Now, of course, the situation is very dangerous. It is very scary. I hope you understood what is going on around the Russian-Ukrainian crisis. Thank you for watching.